not, never under God, never ever, I'm forever on. Check my repertoire, check my repertoire, don't check me now. Let's just checks involved. I've been feeling like I'm next to God, next to God, next to God.
Oh no, I fucked it. Alright, so should be able to hear. I'm pretty sure my sound is working. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about survivor's guilt. I got Eddie with me. You know what I mean? What's up, Eddie? Some other people may be popping in and out as the day goes on, but we'll start with, I guess what I want to start with is like, why do we disproportionately make up the suicide demographic? Like, what do you think it is? What do you think it's because of?
I think there's a lot of contributing factors. One of the main things is that, you know, when guys have been institutionalized, and they work, live, and, you know, party with and go to war with the same group of people, and then you take them out of that environment, there's a overwhelming feeling of loss of camaraderie and feeling kind of lonely. You know, and a lot of these guys just don't know how to recover from the you know, tragedies that happened while they were deployed. Some guys turn to you know, controlled substances. I mean, suicide's a very personal thing for each individual, and I mean, you never know what's going on in somebody's head. So I think a lot of it, you know, regarding veterans making up a large part of the you know, suicide numbers, is just because what a lot of us have gone through and not having the proper tools to take care of yourself afterwards.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with a lot of that. It's almost like jumping into the jacuzzi and then jumping into the pool. You know, it's like super hot, and then we come back to like the world that's sophisticated, and we're like jaded to the point of like, you guys don't know what real problems are. Ortiz says, "What's up?"
Oh, don't want to say hi.
He says hi, Ortiz. How's that for interaction?
Yeah. God, I hope Ortiz is wearing pants.
Probably not. Another thing I feel like I want to like really dissect with me and you specifically, because of how much time you've done in the TRADOC environment. I feel like for us in a law enforcement, and when I say us, I mean the military in general, but a larger percentage of that is going to be like combat arms, because of what you said essentially is relation to direct combat. But sometimes I feel like it's not even the relation to direct combat, because I know a lot of dudes that were infantry that didn't see combat and still have these feelings. And for me, I feel like I always like try to do some like reductionist shit to like figure out where the problem is stemming from. And through therapy and through like my own like shadow work and mental journey, I guess, I kind of figured out that the Army taught me that the solution to everything is death. Like whenever there was a problem, we fucking kill them. And especially in the infantry, it's like every op order, it's, you know, movement to contact to seize objective whatever, in order to allow freedom of maneuver for friendly forces. And freedom of maneuver for friendly forces means the enemy is dead. You know what I mean? And if the enemy is still alive, like, we didn't solve the problem. So I feel like that's like a very direct line to why we would make this choice, like why we can complete this mission over and over again. And that's at least where I'm at with that.
Oh yeah, I mean even something as simple as like buddy aid. You know, they say the best buddy aid is to kill the enemy. So I mean, before you even help out somebody who's bleeding and wounded on the ground, like you're supposed to kill the bad guys so that
Yeah.
they don't just keep shooting the guy that you're trying to fix. Um,
So I'm an EMT now, and even in the EMT world, they say it's called BSI scene safety. It's like the first statement that you make before, in EIB when you're like, all right, I have a 240, and then I'm gonna do clear and load and blah 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 blah. You're like establishing the box that you're gonna work in. So when you say
yeah.
BSI scene safety, for us on the civilian world, it's the same as in the army when we're saying return fire. Like the point or like the condition that you're trying to create, essentially, because all we do is task conditions and standards. The task is to save my buddy's life. The conditions are to make sure that the area is safe, and in order to meet those conditions, some standards have to be met, which is the enemy is suppressed or defeated. You know what I mean? And then in the civilian world, there's police there that are securing the scene for you, basically.
And you know, you're right when it's beat into your head for an extended period of time that like, okay, you know, what is the job of an infantryman? You know, to close with, engage, and destroy the enemy at close range using either hand-to-hand combat or their weapon. Um, you know, it gets to a point where, you know, if what's the saying? If everything, if all you know how to do is hammer or hit things with a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Facts.
You know, and it's one of the things that I learned in my own personal head doc therapy stuff was forget which part of the brain it is. You might know it's the very bottom, the hippocampus, hypocampus, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Basically, and this is just what one of the psychologists told me, and basically what happens is when you go through a trauma, proteins are put on this, like little, I don't know what amount of them, but basically proteins get stuck on this part of the brain, and then when you're out of those, combat situations, you get back home from the deployment, those proteins are still there.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for someone to kind of turn that switch off because get those proteins on there and your body reacts accordingly with adrenaline and all that kind of stuff. And it's almost like you have to train your body to not react and to kind of counter what's been happening to it.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. It's the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is directly related to memory. So me and Hudson were kind of saying this the last time we talked towards like the end, but it's the amygdala is your fear response, and it's more about like self-preservation than necessarily the way that we usually perceive fear, because I would say that all of our like infantry tactics or schools of thought are based around fear. So like I know when if I'm on point and I'm walking up and down hills and I come to a certain hill and then I look around and I'm like, that looks like the enemy could be there. They look like they could be there. They look like I'm like, I don't really want to walk down this. So then that's when you set up support by fire and you start creating conditions in order to maintain like the greatest amount of safety that you could have. You know what I mean? So when I was going through therapy, she told me something similar, but she was talking about my pineal gland or I think maybe it was my amygdala, but one of the two creates adrenaline, and it's directly like controlling your autonomic nervous system, which is like your fight or flight responses. And inside of those fight or flight responses is how to say this. So when we're deployed, right, a civilian doesn't really necessarily understand this, but when we're deployed, it's not like the old days in World War II. We get put on a base that's generally safe. You know what I mean? Like, you've been to Iraq, right? Fucking Liberty and Anaconda, that shit was like the size of a major city, miles wide. But it's not necessarily safe either, because I remember I was in the green zone one time and they brought a VBIT in and it blew the windows out of the hotel that we were staying at, which is like miles from the fence. Or they'll get rockets into the fob. So even the soft skill dudes will get, you know, some, what is it called? Some type of fear response. So then you have us that go on deployment or into sector basically. So we're essentially molesting our pineal gland to like produce this fucking chemical adrenaline over and over and over again. But like even when we're back and we're safe and we're chilling, we're not necessarily safe. So that shit is always turned on. And then when we come home, that's why we go out and party as hard as we do, and we have all like, I mean, we feel like there's like this conscious effort for that, which there is to an extent. But then there's a point where it's like, all right, bro, I'm safe now. This is America. And then I remember when I first got back from Iraq, like I was terrified to go under underpasses and shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's really hard to turn that off. You know, after you've been in that environment, and you know, unfortunately, the reintegration stuff that you do, you know, when you as soon as you get back from your deployment, is more of like a check the box kind of thing instead of actually do something for the soldier, especially when you consider the fact that a lot of these issues really don't arise until, you know, 30, 60, 180 days after somebody returns from, you know, a deployment. You know, for me, after my first Iraq deployment, it was the same thing. You know, and just a couple of months after being back, I don't know, I just remember stuff. I felt differently and different reactions, and I ended up kind of withdrawing into myself a lot.
I definitely know that feeling. I remember I remember when I first came home. I remember feeling, I don't even know how to describe this feeling. I shouldn't be here. That was the feeling. I'm not supposed to be alive right now. Because I remember, I mean, I had a pretty fucked up childhood, and it is what it is, but like, I remember joining the army, and I remember that first Iraq deployment, and I remember having to tell myself mentally that I'm gonna die. Like, I had to already accept the fact that I was dead in order to be able to accomplish the mission and like not give a fuck about anything. And that continued through like the Afghanistan deployments as shit got progressively worse. But I never died. You know what I'm saying? Like it never, that thing never came that I was like, I don't know, I don't really want to say wanting, but at the same time it was like a want. It was like, I, because there's this, you know, that Norse mythology shit with Valhalla, like I'll die a hero. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have to live to be the villain. Ortiz should be joining in a second, but I don't have to live to see myself become the villain, because I never really, I guess the word would be, liked myself. You know what I mean? But that took me a while to get to that point.
Oh yeah, I mean, and when it comes to stuff like survivor's guilt, and, you know, having to accept the fact that, you know, any day you could be your last day. You know, it's tough, and I think a lot of the survivor's guilt, where the guilt comes from, is when you get that call on the radio, and it's like, hey, you know, this platoon's in contact, or this company's in contact, and you hear that they've got a guy down, and your first thought is, I'm glad it's not me. Like, regardless of who you are, your very first thought is, I'm glad it's not me. Second thought immediately after that is, I hope this guy's okay. You know, and I think that's where a lot of the guilt comes from, because you feel bad because a buddy of yours, somebody you really cared about, is either wounded or dead, and the very first thing that comes to your mind is, I'm glad it wasn't me. And
Yeah.
but that's just natural. You know, everybody does that. But that's something that we, know, carry with us, especially when we get home. Um, I remember, like in Afghanistan, walking up and down mountains, waiting to get shot at, and you have the ANA with you, and they're scanning their little icon, and they're eventually they find a channel where the Taliban is on, and they come up and tell you like, hey, the Taliban's watching us, and they're gonna start shooting like when we get halfway up the mountain. Um, and it's like okay, like the fear that I had when it's like, all right, the enemy sees you and they're ready and they're waiting for you to get into their kill box. Like that fear was I can't describe it. But as soon as they started shooting, that fear went away, and that was because okay, now I know where they are and I can do something about it. But of course, when they start shooting, sometimes they actually hit something and or someone, and that's where you start thinking like, damn, I'm glad it wasn't me. You know? So it's tough, and I think that's where a lot of survivor's guilt comes from, is that whole, you know, selfish first thought, you know.
Feeling guilty for being alive.
Yeah, and it's shitty. Like you shouldn't feel guilty for being alive, and like you shouldn't have to go to war and die, just to, I guess, not feel bad about not dying. Um, and it's tough. It's really tough. And for me, while I was deployed, one of the mechanisms that I kind of focused on the most was, like I said last time, the three M's. Okay, what's the mission? All right, let me take care of my guys, and then I'm last. So, I would put myself into harm's way before I would put my guys into it.
Yeah.
And, I just felt like no matter what I'm doing, I have to get these guys home.
Yeah.
And I need to make sure that they, make it out of here safe and sound. It wasn't that I didn't. It wasn't that I didn't care if I died. But yeah, no, it was just for me that fear. The biggest concerns of mine were making sure we're accomplishing the mission, taking care of the guys.
Your wife just popped in.
What's up, Ed? That was an explosion outside. It sounded like somebody just shot a huge firework off in the neighborhood for some random reason.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like, we'll say there was this lieutenant on my last deployment that died, and he was like arguably a very good dude, if that makes sense. Like he was family oriented. He every presentation I ever had of this dude was like strength and happiness and this, that, and the other, and he was just a very good dude, like in general. And I would always, like after his death, I always kind of thought about it as like, I have to live because he can no longer be, if that makes sense. So I like put a bunch of weight on my shoulders of like, I get this chance to be here, but while even during that fight of like trying to put this weight on me, I was still thinking about how the fact that I shouldn't be here. Like it should have been me. Like he should be here. I fucking suck. Like I'm a horrible person. I can't fucking be nice to my wife. I can't be nice to my kids. I don't know how to talk to people, you know what I mean? Like I drink all the time. I was just doing mad drugs at the time too, and like it just was this downward spiral of all of the hate that I had for myself. But it was all true. Everything I thought about me is true. You know what I mean? And then at the end of the
tend to be our biggest critics.
yeah.
I mean, and it's shitty that happens, and it's hard to get out of that downward spiral of thinking.
The thing that helped me the most was even though I am a shitty person, I just have to stop doing the shitty shit. And then I'm no longer a shitty person. You see what I'm saying? Like, I know there was times where, like, I've done some really fucked up shit to people, you know what I mean? And then I feel really fucking guilty about it. So then this image that I have in my mind of me, right? My ego image, I guess you can call it. I look at that thing and I think, or at the time, this was years ago now, but I'm trying to like put myself mentally back when I was feeling all this stuff. It was like, you don't deserve to be here. That was like the main thought process. You're a piece of shit. You should have died. And then in that sentence, there was this other voice that would say, like, and if you had died then, you would have died a hero. You wouldn't have been here to fuck everything up. Because, like, I know a lot of us, me personally, when I got out of active duty, I struggled so much with, like, what is my purpose now? I don't have a direction. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. And then it allowed for all of... The military is very structured, and you said it in the beginning, like institutionalized, right? So like the ARs tell me what I can and can't do very specifically. The FMs tell me what I should do, right? This is going to give you the best outcomes. And I go from there. And then if I don't know anything, I just go talk to the fucking dude above me, and then he knows the answer, and then I just go with that. But then when I'm out in the real world, all of these opportunities are on top of me, and it feels like I'm trapped. Like under all of this potential life that I could be living. And then I'm sitting there beating myself up even more because I'm like, well, you're not doing shit with it. This dude's not even here. And you're fucking this all up. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it's, like I said, you know, we're our own worst critics, but do you ever stop and ask yourself why? Why do you think this about yourself? Like, why do you think that you're a shitty person? Just because you didn't die and somebody else died? You know, it's war. You can't control everything that happens. You know, I mean, the best guys, you can be the best trained, best equipped, best everything. And all it takes is one bullet. You know, that's it. And it's war. You can't control it. Feeling bad because somebody died, that's fine. But hating yourself because they died and you didn't die doesn't do anything for anybody. It just helps, or it just kind of makes you feel like shit. And you know, it's a real hard thing to get over. You know, especially when it's somebody that you cared about, somebody that had a real impact on your life and seemed to have so much more ahead of them. But it's a very personal thing. I mean, death is a personal thing. It's hard. It's hard.
I know for me personally, it was never so like Alan Watts says something about the problem with thinking is that most people don't think their thoughts to their death. Like, what's the end of this specific logical conclusion that you have? So you start off on like some presupposition and you don't ever take it all the way to where it should stop or where the ending of it is. So like when you're asking me what was I thinking or why didn't I do this or that or the other, it was because I didn't think the thought all the way through. Oh, this is Ortiz. What's up, Ortiz? We can't hear you.
He seems to be having a moment.
In 1 second.
Eddie, restart your camera.
Okay.
Yo, what up, though? Y'all can hear me?
Yeah, we can now.
Alright, hold on, babe. Hello. Okay, yeah, I can get that.
You started streaming your screen, son?
No.
There it
Hey,
is.
listen, man. People need to see who I am. There's no point in having a discussion if you can't even see the person that you're trying to talk to.
I feel you. Nice beard.
That is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't
Hold
even
on,
know
give me.
how to start my screen. Oh,
How do you make this thing like super big? Yeah, man. I'm new to this like sharing stuff.
It's all good.
There we go.
So yeah, we're just talking about
Alright.
survivor's guilt right now.
Yeah, no. I thought that was an interesting topic to have because, ironic enough, when I was hearing it, I thought about the aspect that you guys were both in before I did. So I get to give the privates aspect of what it was like before you even joined. Because by the time you guys went in, I'm brand new.
Yeah.
You know, at that time, I believe Dan Lee was in first platoon.
Yeah.
Sergeant Edwards at the time was in third platoon, but he was the guy that was supposed to be there to, hold us down while everything was going away. And shit! I mean, no, be all right. Here. And it's why I thought the conversation was curious because, as much as you guys describe survivor's guilt, I think about the aspect of, man, what it was like for me being a private.
Yeah. Well, what was it like?
And having to know that without any guidance, you're going to Germany, buddy. Hey man, have a good time, because that's what they tell you. Without breaking any OPSEC, but they tell you, hey man, you're going to Germany. So I was in Germany from September, and then I remember October. A certain captain, a certain commander, told us, hey, we're deploying to Iraq. And I remember being like, shit, I just got here. I just got to this unit. We're already going to Iraq? I just got here. And I remember seeing some of the other guys that had deployed already, with the big red one going, shit, man. Obviously as a private, I don't know anything about Ramadi. What do I know, dude? I'm a guy from New Jersey, West New York, New Jersey.
Yeah.
What do I know about what's going on in the military? I'm just a guy surviving in the streets. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I joined because I had two options. I was going to work at Kmart, make meager money, or I was going to join the military and I was going to get some respect, and I was going to defend our country. Because at the time, the idea of America was fucking lovely to me. I grew up in Die Hard, man. I grew up in a real man's man era, so to speak.
Yeah.
Rambo, Die Hard, Bruce Willis. And that's what was expected in a sense. So, being someone from the hood, what options do we have? We either make music, we're good at sports, or we join the military. That's like legit. Those are our options. When you're from New Jersey and you grew up in my neighborhood, that's what it was. And I'll never forget when getting there, Sergeant Edwards was there and he was super welcoming, of course, at the time. And just knowing that, I'm like, man, this is your life now. Like, you signed up for this. And it's to go again with the conversation of survivor's guilt, because as you guys both know, we got there in October, and then come January, what happened? Platoon sergeant goes down.
Yep.
And the platoon sergeant, y'all already know that's the main component.
He's dead.
Yeah, and I get it. When I first showed up at the unit, way back in the day, when you're the brand new guy, you just can't help but have this overwhelming feeling that everybody knows what's going on and you're just lost.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what's going on. At least when I first got there, like to my unit, the only thing going on was like Bosnia. So there was really no, we weren't in between deployment cycles or something like that. And, you know, coming straight out of basic and then being at the unit for a couple months and then bam, having to go down range, like that's tough. And unfortunately, there was an extended period of time where that was happening to a lot of soldiers just coming out of basic. And like you said, having your platoon sergeant being taken out of the fight, you know, early on in that deployment, that was tough. I remember receiving that guy and taking care of him when he got back, and he was telling me things that, you know, just blew my mind. He would tell me things like, dude, I don't know if I'm dead or alive. You know, he's like, I don't know if I actually died there or what. You know, because, I mean, he got hit at a very close range. He went down, and once he grabbed his weapon, or once, you know, this tried to take him out, you know, the guy put a AK in his face, pulled the trigger, and the round didn't fire. You know, so in his mind, you know, he's...
Yeah. Yep. I'll do it.
Your connection's... Yeah, your connection's not the best, Ortiz.
Yeah, my bad, man. It's my connection was pretty bad for a second. But yeah, that's like, it's like Red said, that's what happened.
I remember I was on Echo. No,
QRF.
No, I was on that other fob with the S, the one that was to the north that we used to resupply from, and I remember sitting in the back of the Bradley and hearing that shit come over the net, and like two of my best friends in the entire army were in that platoon, and then I just remember sitting there like this, like, please don't be fucking Swenson, please don't be fucking Rob. Please don't be Swenson.
Yeah, man, dude.
Please don't be fucking Swenson. And then I found out who it was, and I was like, part of me was like, oh my God, thank God. And then the other part of me was like, holy fuck, this is real. Like, this is no longer a fucking game. You know what I mean?
Man, and that's, you know, exactly what you just said. I'm glad you said that, because, like, not for nothing, again, coming from where I'm from, you know, it's a little bit different. You know, before the army, I've definitely been shot at. I've gone through my own shit, you know, but nothing prepares you like what it's like being in the service, because at least we are trained literally to react. And I'll never forget that day. I don't know if you guys remember a little somebody by the name of Grothy.
Yeah.
But that was the guy that helped me get through that situation. You know, because he was the one that grabbed me when I was shitting bricks and was like, yo, this is what we need to do. But you best believe I was shitting bricks when all of that was going on.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's always the worst thing, because you think of, like I said, I think of my fucking, I wonder what his life is like now, you know?
It's never easy.
Like, I mean, it's not supposed to be easy either. I mean, shit, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
This is true.
But it's not. And that's why they say it's, you know, it's the 1% that get to do, you know, joining the army, and then it's the 1% that gets to join the infantry. Because, listen, a lot of people think infantry is just, you know, Call of Duty. The reality is that we take a lot more discipline than most people try to expect us to have. Because it's easy to pull the trigger. Anybody could do that.
It's hard not to.
But it's hard not to when everything is going on
Yeah.
and all you have is it's all you have is your training. Literally. And that's why I thought this conversation that you were having about survivor's guilt, I feel like it's important because besides survivor's guilt of being in the military, there's survivor's guilt that happens after. And in my opinion, a lot of people don't talk about that.
Yeah.
Because survivor's guilt isn't just you being live and, hey, listen, I had to do what I did for love of country or whatever reason. But there's survivor's guilt with having friends in the military and wanting to help them. And I think that's a topic that doesn't really get discussed so much. Because, the mental psyche of a soldier nowadays, in my opinion, I feel like it's very flawed. It's, sometimes people like to say, like, hey, man, you were in the army, you could do this. And my response is, I was like, dude, you thinking that I was in the army is not what you think it is. Like, just because I was in the army doesn't mean I'm some military badass dude. Like, shit sucks. Whether you've seen combat or you haven't,
Yeah.
it sucks. Because you're away from family, you're away from what you know, and you decided to sacrifice and put yourself out there for whatever reason, but that's what you did. And it's terrible. It sucks. You don't have to be a fucking combat veteran to know what it's like to be in the military, in my opinion. Because I've heard a lot of sob stories. I heard you guys saying earlier that there was a conversation about some guy who had survivor's guilt because, he didn't do what he felt. And I've had plenty of conversations like that at Berkeley College, the college that I go to. And I've talked to guys and I'm like, why would you think that way? You did what you were trained to do, and on top of that, you fought tooth and nail to make sure that your boys came back alive.
Mm.
We all know, every single one of us that signs that contract, life isn't promised. One of my boys, SSG Puga, used to say, today's a good day to die.
Yeah, but this I feel like is like kind of the point that we're talking about is that when you come home, it's that mentality, and that's kind of it's not so much that I want to die, but it's that I have a hard time finding the will to live. I remember saying that to one of my therapists one time, and it's like I didn't feel when I first got out like I had any purpose anymore. And the more I thought about it, it wasn't necessarily purpose, it was that I felt useless. I felt I had no, because when you're in the infantry, people don't really understand what it is that we do. So like I'm good at a bunch of shit, but I don't really have any certifications to tell you.
No,
you know
like,
what I mean?
and I don't mean to cut you off, but it's like I get what you're saying. Like financially, intellectually, you have the tools that you're, so to speak, you have the tools that are accessible to you that you've learned and you yourself have applied. Because me, without saying, like, I know what you've been through, and it's like, damn, to see you, what you're doing now, it's like, this man is self-educated himself again. Because prior to you joining the military, I know the type of guy you were because we've had those type of discussions. And then seeing you in the military, I've seen the type of person you were at that time. And then seeing you now, it's like, all right, this man has re-envisioned himself. He's decided that I'm going to reinvent myself so that I can be useful to people. More than anything, I can be useful to brothers that I know go through the exact same shit.
Yeah.
And Red can attest to this because, Red is one of those people that always super approachable. What do you got to talk about? Hey, here we are. Let's talk about it. The door's open. It's up to you to open that door. Because in my opinion, that's another thing. A lot of us, we choose not to open that door. For whatever reason, we choose that door needs to be closed.
Because it hurts.
Yeah.
And I can't, and at the end of the day, me personally, listen, a lot of us have lost a lot of people. But at some point, I no longer personally, I can't take accountability for people that don't want to do the exact same thing when I'm the one behind them constantly, 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 constantly. You know, it's not to sound selfish, but it's the reality. All of us eventually lead our own lives, and we do our best, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it is that you choose to reach out to people. That's up to you. You know, and that's why, like, when I saw that on my YouTube, you know, for Brothers in Time, I saw the topic of survivor's guilt. I was like, this is a pretty interesting topic because me personally, I remember my first 2 or 3 years ago, I lost friends immediately, and they weren't even in combat. I lost friends that weren't even in combat. Imagine that.
Yep.
Imagine coming back home from deployment and losing your life to some natural shit.
Yeah, it's tough, you know, when you look back and you think, man, you know, we've lived through all that stuff on a deployment, and then just regular everyday stuff, you know, kind of takes somebody out. And you consider everything back in the civilian world when you're out of a deployment, you consider everything that doesn't have to do with combat so far beneath you that it really doesn't even warrant, you know, a title as, you know, some kind of problem. You know, it's just an annoyance, you know, something like that. I mean, I had a buddy that, you know, we got back from Afghanistan, and he went home on his, you know, R&R, and he died. And it was really tough. Like, it shocked all of us, you know. And it's like, wow, you know, like I said just a minute ago, the stuff that we lived through, you know, we consider it such a high echelon of operating and thinking and moving and acting that when you get back to the civilian sector, you almost forget that even simple mundane things can still hurt and kill you.
That's literally why I don't ride motorcycles, because of that event. That's literally why.
Yeah, and it was sad. It was really sad. So it's tough. Yeah.
Oh, it definitely is. But as somebody that went through both of your guys' leadership, you know, I feel like you guys made the transition of it being from, you know, that brand new private that you guys all get, and making the transition easier. Because at the same time, a lot of you guys were going through the same shit. At that time, I believe Danley had just gotten back from like a three-month period or whatever it is, OPSEC. You know, he came back, and, you know, guys like Danley, Swenson, those were the guys that I had to look up to. Those were guys my age. And if anything, those were guys that I know, in my opinion, I could understand what they went through. No offense, Red, but you guys don't know shit about the hood, man. You fucking, hey, man, hey, listen, would you like to serve this country? And hey, buddy, all righty, good job, sir, all right. You know, guys like Danley and me, options are very few and limited. But, you know, like, I was grateful that, you know, obviously you knew who my squad leader was. And I was blessed. I was blessed because besides CSM, so-and-so, we had the Hispanic crew. Where it was... You already know, right? It was Los Tres Amigos.
What the other part about that, you survive a deployment and then you come back to natural causes, I remember, it's hard for me to explain to people, but there's not many of us left from that first company, and it's hard to even, like, demarcate where the company starts and when it ended, you know what I mean? Because it's like through time.
Remember McCaffrey?
Yeah.
That was my first loss.
Are you talking about
for me
McCready?
personally?
Are you talking about McCready?
McCready.
Yeah.
Yeah, McCready. was my first loss that I ever had to deal with, besides obviously my platoon sergeant. But that was my first loss. And it hurt me a lot because it happened when we came home.
Yeah, he was in Phoenix. I'm from Phoenix. I was here when that happened.
Yeah, and it was like it happened when we came home, and like a week before it happened, we were talking about making plans and everything, and that's when I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Like, we just went through all this fucking bullshit for a year. I come back home and my boy dies because he didn't have his fucking seatbelt."
Yeah.
Could you imagine as a parent what that's like? I can't even imagine. I didn't talk to my mother for 3 months. Me being Puerto Rican, that's a crime. That's a sin.
I'm not
So-
Puerto Rican. I don't know.
Yeah. But like coming home to that, I remember like I was like heartbroken. I'm like, for a seatbelt.
Yeah.
For a seatbelt.
I feel like there was a time. I don't know many people left from our company. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of see the company as like when I first joined, it was like 07 ish, and that's the company that I remember. And then the platoon that I had, there's only like 15 people left from my platoon, like the original platoon. You know what I mean?
There's this, I think this one movie called Battlestar Ship or something like that, where the commander remembers everyone who like sacrificed themselves for the unit. I know that when you guys deployed, especially Red, before we deployed, when it was actually 1-2 Big Red 1, the sacrifices that unit made for combat outweigh the losses that I remember having, because we lost. And in our unit, we lost a lot of guys to being home.
It's really not. You can't weigh one life against the other. I mean, and our first Iraq deployment, that was our first test of battle. And after 4 days after we took control of our sector, we lost our company commander and another soldier and a couple guys on our very first Iraq deployment. And it was difficult. One thing that's kind of hard, and a lot of soldiers do this, and I've heard a lot of guys talk about this. They almost feel bad to talk about things that happened to them or people that they lost, because they feel that everybody else experienced something worse.
Yep.
And they feel that like what they go through just doesn't add up or compare, to what somebody else went through. But what everybody has to fully understand is that everything affects everyone differently. And just because somebody else went through a trauma, that doesn't take away from the trauma that you went through. It doesn't matter what, everything that I went through prior to you showing up. All that did was give me tools to be able to help you and prep you for whatever trials will come, ahead of you or after you showed up.
In my personal opinion, I understand the argument that you're giving, where I understand that everyone does suffer through certain things, but in the same token, the argument can be said that when someone loses somebody to alcoholism, when somebody loses somebody to their own detriment of their own health, no matter what you try to do to that person, and you try to talk to them, that's a different approach than sometimes losing someone through actions of serving their country. And what happens when you're in combat, because losing your friend in combat, it's something obviously all three of us, I can honestly say, we all respect. All three of us, we respect that somebody sacrificed their lives. It's in the Army's creed, we all know the Warriors creed. I know I control alt delete a lot of shit from the Army, but there's certain things I still remember. So like in the war, never give up, never surrender. And I feel like when we lose friends outside of that, it's the exact discussion that we're trying to have about survivor's guilt, because we all go through, like you said, right? We all go through different motions, and we all take the actions of someone's loss in a different case. I can't tell you how to feel about X. I can't tell you, Danley, how to feel about Y. We all go through our own motions in a different case. I'm somebody, for example, I'm used to losing friends. The way I tell people, I'm like, listen, I'm not active on social media. But if I had Facebook, and if you see me on there, it's literally because I'm used to losing a friend once a year. And that's my reality. It hasn't stopped. And you know that, right?
Oh yeah, and it's tough. I mean, I lost a friend due to he had retired. He did more than 20 years, retired, 100% disabled, permanently, totally. Um, Lost him to drinking, and he knew the risks of drinking, given health conditions and stuff like that. But he did it because he felt like he wasn't in control of certain things in his life. But what he could control was how much he would drink. And unfortunately, I ended up getting a call from his wife one day that's like, hey, they called me Blanquito. They, hey, your
That
friend.
gringo.
Yeah, he's like, your friend, he's in the hospital, like the doctors are saying like 24 hours. And I'm like, holy shit, And you always think, what if I had called and talked to this guy? What if I had called and talked to him? And it really, what if is the biggest sentence, in the English
And you
language.
can't have what ifism in life.
Yeah, it will haunt you forever. Um, so to me, that was kind of a different kind of suicide. Um, one of the best explanations that I've ever heard for suicide was from a soldier when I was cadre at the WTB. This guy had already tried to kill himself. Um, and I asked him, hey, what was going through your mind when this happened? What were you thinking? And he was like, you know what? I wasn't super angry at anything. I wasn't really depressed, nothing like that. He was like, for me, personally, it felt like the one thing that I was supposed to do at that time. Like, okay, I've done this, taken care of this. Yep, now I need to commit suicide. And, obviously he didn't, but he was still haunted with that kind of stuff. And it's weird because, men, when we commit suicide, it tends to be tragic and effective. Gunshot to the head, um, hang ourselves, something like that. It's dramatic, it's bloody, but it gets the job done. Um, but like I said, there's that slow suicide where it's like,
Shit, sometimes people fail at that.
yeah,
And it's even worse. That's
yeah.
just the reality.
There's
Like,
that.
I'm not here. Like, I'm definitely not the guy to talk to and sugarcoat shit. Like, in Berkeley College, I've talked to some veterans that dudes were fucked up. And I'm like, you know, how do I get to reach you? Not to cut you off, right? But it's just like, like you said, like, I'll always say the one thing I loved about you was always that you had this comedic approach to being a leader, because it showed that, one, you were approachable, but two, don't fuck with me. Because funny guys are the worst ones to piss off. It's always been like that in life. In life. Like, yeah, I can be cool with you, but piss me off and see what kind of person you get. And that's personally what I saw. And the same with Danley. There was times Danley, you could talk to, you could have a joke with, piss him off. And these guys were freaking chasing monsters like fucking 500 meters away. And I'm like, oh, damn. Shit. But at the same time, that was the discipline and the respect that we all had to leadership and why it affects us in a certain way. because at the end of the day, in my opinion, respect is earned. It's not given.
True. I know, I feel like I know who you're talking about, and I think he was a Mike golf instructor. Are we talking about the same dude, Eddie?
Again,
Yeah.
I'm not using names, but
No, I know. But
respect.
we had another one like 2 years ago, and he overdosed, right? And then me and Momo, and a couple Atkins, a couple other people went down to Florida, and Browning was there. I think he was there.
I do Atkins.
Yeah.
Shout out to Atkins. I love that guy. I I love that man. There's some soldiers that I used to love that were in 1-2.
Facts.
Besides you guys, of course, because why else would I be in this discussion? But shout out to some of those guys.
Yeah.
Crazy Atkins.
He overdosed, and before I joined the army, I was a drug addict, right? Like I smoked meth from the time I was 13 until I was 18. So I remember that feeling. Like suicidality isn't new to me. Like I remember being suicidal as a kid, where it wasn't necessarily that I was willing to die, but it was like I'm doing all these drugs, so low key I don't want to live. Like I'm kind of wanting this to be
The
over.
option was always there for you.
Yeah, I kind of want this to happen. And then I feel like that's kind of that same thread when people drink themselves into death too. It's like
I'm gonna throw out a name out here, and the only reason I'm throwing out this name is because I'm pretty sure this guy doesn't exist anymore. But you guys remember Baraki?
I do. I know exactly where he is. So I was PCSing, or I was coming home one time, and he hit me up on Facebook, and he was in Texas, and I was driving through Texas coming back from Fort Hood, and he was like, yo, whoop to whoop, hit me up, and it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. I was like, oh yeah, cool, I'll come by. And then he comes out, and we start shooting the shit, chopping it up, and then he starts telling me he just got out of jail for like 6 months, and I was like, what? Baraki? You were in jail? Like for what? And then he was like, possession. I was like, possession of what? And he said, dope.
That's with that being said,
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying? Where like even today, for example, like I'm going through a situation in college. I'm about to get my bachelor's degree, but there's like a money situation. With collectively, they're trying to say that I have to pay them this, and I'm like, listen, I'll pay you whatever I got. I know this conversation is being recorded, but I'm telling you right now, I'm from the streets. The hustle never stops, and that's a fact. The hustle out here, it never stops.
There's other ways, bro.
And I'm not saying that in the FBI, the ABC boys is watching. Man, I'm not saying nothing illegal. I'm just saying the hustle never stops, because we don't. And it should, because around here, you gotta do. It's like you gotta grind. If you don't grind, then what are you doing? You're gonna be a part of the system. And then we've had this topic, we've had this discussion before, where I'm like, dude, there is a system. Literally, there's a system divided. That's the topic for today, because I'm gonna continue with the topic that we got, and I apologize for getting out of hand, but the reality is that where I'm from, it's a systematic system. And you got to try to get out of it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you'll end up like Red. Freaking being a platoon sergeant, making money, and it's just like, hey, all right, man, I'm good.
I mean, that's what the goal is, right? Is to live a happy life, have a happily ever after.
Hey, listen, everybody's got different opinions about what life is supposed to be. For me, my goal is literally just to take care of my family, man, because from Hispanics, we're all about family. All we got to do is take care of our mamas, and that's it.
I'm trying to take care of my
Even
babies.
bad men love their mamas. 310 to Yuma, that's the quote. Russell Crowe said that. Even bad men love their mamas. We don't got to be perfect, because none of us here in this conversation are perfect. But you know what we are? We're good, honest men that always still try to strive to be as successful as we can be, regardless of the situation that was put in front of us.
True.
And that's, again, to talk about the whole topic of survivor's guilt. How do you go about it? You can literally hold on to the excuse that, listen, because I lost this person or that, that's why I can't move on. Or you can choose to take the aspect of like, listen, I lost this person, and you know what? This person knew me, they loved me, and they would never want me to be like that.
Yep.
So this is what I gotta do.
I feel
This
like
is what I'm gonna do to respect the person, to honor that person's living, because that person's not here anymore. But guess what? If that person was alive, this is what I'm supposed to do, and that's a fact. Not everybody says that, but in my opinion, that's the reality.
I agree.
You know, I could have had a whole different life. I know that. But if it wasn't for the people that influenced my Danleys, my Edwards, my Castillos, my Roberts, my Swensons, I wouldn't be the man that I am right now.
True.
If it wasn't for the fact that I could actually hit up my company commander, my first sergeant, that I could just literally hit him up on Facebook because, like, hey, man, I'm going through some shit. Without saying names, that I could actually text them and, hey, I'm here to talk to you. Who the fuck knows if I'm alive, man? And that's a fact.
I feel like there's a problem
That's
though.
reality.
I feel like there's a problem though because a lot of us don't reach out. You know what I mean? Or we don't
And at
see
the end
the
of the
problem.
day,
Good.
no, in my opinion, at the end of the day, that's seldom up to you. Why can't I call Danley? Why can't I call Red?
Yep.
Besides the fact that it's late and I'm calling you to tell you, hey man, I'm going through some shit, why wouldn't you answer? If I was calling Red right now and I'm like, man, listen, I seen you online on PlayStation, man, I'm going through some shit. You don't think he's gonna talk to me?
No, he will. For sure.
As brothers, I feel like there's this negative content that for some fucking reason, we all need to talk to each other every single day.
One of the
I
things,
have friends.
you know, like you had said, Ortiz, like when we grew up, it was, you know, like, hey, be a man, be a man, be a man. And when you spend the majority of your childhood with that being beat into your skull, men don't cry, men don't have feelings. We're just these stoic people that just cruise through life and everything just comes right off of us. And even, especially in the military, especially in combat arms, you're surrounded by nothing but alpha males. And they're the idea is that everybody can handle everything perfectly and that you're weak if you can't handle it. So there's this stigma that exists where if you ask for help, it's because you're weak.
Yeah.
And those guys that feel that way are the ones that end up, unfortunately, harming themselves, doing stuff to themselves. And, you know, I would much rather be woken up in the middle of the night by somebody saying, hey man, I need help, than, you know, get a call and say, hey, their funeral is going to be this day.
Yeah.
You know, and it's tough, like I said, because of that stigma. When I was still active in the Army, I came down on orders to be a drill sergeant. I was told that I could not be a drill sergeant because I had been to behavioral health within the past 12 months. And that was a negating factor for being a drill sergeant. At that time in my career, I was training lieutenants how to be platoon leaders, infantry platoon leaders. But they said because I went to behavioral health within the past year, I couldn't teach civilians how to be soldiers, but I can still teach lieutenants how to be leaders. And that's the mentality of it. You know, hey, it will hold your career back to a certain extent. You know, when you have these appointments to go to, the line units are going to look at you like, damn, we can't do shit because, you know, Sergeant Edwards is always over here doing this, you know?
Yeah.
And so everybody has that negative stigma, and they just tend to just bottle
Dude,
it all.
let me, and I'm going to be honest with this, and I can do this because I don't give a shit. I'm good anyway. 2 years ago, I was going to be a police officer. I passed the civil service test in New Jersey. I got like 92. without tooting my own horn and sucking my own dick, I'm pretty godlike. I know that. But the only reason I chose not to be a cop was because of the simple fact that I couldn't smoke weed. Literally, I was like, wait. The one thing that's helped me throughout all these, dude, I've got fucking, like I said, without going into too much information, I've been through some shit. And my body itself, and I'm like, now I'm fucking Goku times 3. But the only reason, again, I could say this with full confidence, is that I was like, and I told the captain that was interviewing me that day, I was like, dude, I can't smoke weed and be a cop, even though it's legal. I don't think I'm cut out for this.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that for sure. I just think that what Eddie was talking about the stigma about behavioral health and like going and being able to talk about shit and not being looked at a certain way, especially in that op tempo, directly leads to why certain people don't reach out, right? We don't want our buddy to like see us in that light, right? When I'm in my darkest,
That weak element.
yeah, when I'm at my darkest, I don't want anybody else to know, and I want to be able to pull myself out because I know that I should be able to, and this, that, and the other. But I feel like we forget a lot of the times that everything that we did in the infantry we could not have done without somebody else. Like, there's combat multipliers, you know what I mean? Even the soft skill dudes, we couldn't have done a lot of shit without FOs. We couldn't have done shit without the medics. We couldn't have done shit without, you know what I'm saying, the cooks feeding us or whatever. So like, there's times where like when you're in an ambush and you call for fire, you're literally saying, I need fucking help, and I need fucking help right now. You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, like, I mean, again, these are certain tales that you're not supposed. But like, I remember when you were in first platoon, you guys were the spear of everything. I don't know if you remember that, but you guys were the spear of everything that led to us getting there. Without you guys, we weren't able to set up our patrol bases, and I know you know that. You guys were the ones that, like, remember, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, you guys were the ones that led us to be there. If it wasn't for you guys, 2nd platoon wasn't going to be there. 3rd platoon, HQ. You guys were the ones that decided a platoon of what? Maybe 40, 42 people was supposed to take charge of a certain patrol base.
Yeah.
And it's again to what you're saying. Like, everyone's going to take it different. Not everyone's supposed to accept that.
Yeah.
And especially if you're brand new, like I'm saying, like what happened with me. We just got there. And 2 months later, we're supposed to be right there, middle of combat.
It's never easy to watch a man who you looked up to be in a hospital bed. It's never easy watching some private that you were responsible for get taken off in a helicopter. It's never easy. I don't know how to say this, but like whenever I'm on Facebook, because I'm still on Facebook every day, but whenever I see a message pop up, like I see that little bubble, I instantly think, I'm like, okay, who died now? Like, who's dead now? Because there was a time where like it was like 8 or 9 a week, and it would be suicide, overdose, overdose. And the question go ahead.
Like, obviously for me, it was like after McGreedy, for me, the one that hit me the hard, like, Lars.
Yeah.
I went to basic training with that dude. And it was tough because that dude was fucking innocent as shit. And it was like, for me, it was like one of those things where it was like, dude, why are you in the infantry of all things? Go be freaking work SI or something. Like, you don't go work for the S job. But that happened, and that was tough. That was tough for me, bro.
And I think
And that's why, again, I said, like, my survivor's guilt in my experience is that my survivor's guilt is different from your guys and your experiences because you guys lost friends to combat. And that's my reality. You guys lost friends to combat. I lost friends to coming back home.
Well, losing
And
friends
that's
is
why I feel
so
like this conversation is so important because it's, again, besides survivor's guilt, is how to cope with it, how to
losing
be able to
friends
talk to it.
is still losing friends, and just because somebody didn't die, like Danley said, in combat so they can go to Valhalla. I mean, even now, you see posted everywhere like till Valhalla and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm
but
not.
it,
Yeah,
it
listen, bro.
doesn't
I'm
matter.
sorry. Thor came out like in 2008.
Yeah, like losing friends is still losing friends, and it's
Yeah,
it's hard to cope with that. And like I told Danley earlier, it was like, you know what? When you're in combat and you hear somebody's been hurt or hit, your first thought is, I'm glad it wasn't me. Your immediate second thought is, I hope everybody's okay. You know, and I think that's where a lot of the guilt comes from, and it's natural human
and I
feeling.
think that's fair to say. I honestly believe that's fair to say in your perspective, because for me personally, I didn't go through the exact same thing like you guys did, where it happened on the moment. Like you just said, where it's just you're hearing it on the radio and you're hoping for the best. And I think that's a fair argument to have. Where I don't know what that's like.
Like I said, though, it's still the fact that you're losing a friend. You're losing somebody that, like I said earlier, you live, work, train, deploy, and party with these people.
yeah.
And they become so much more than just a coworker. Become so much more than just a friend. That they become, especially when you're stationed somewhere away from home. You make a family with the guys around you, and you have this connection where like the people that you go to the bar and have a drink with, the people that you train with, you know, they will do anything humanly possible to make sure that you survive something. And you would do the same for them. And when you lose them, especially to something that's outside of combat, it's hard to even fathom. Like, this guy was so good at everything. He was so squared away. He went home on vacation and drank too much, or he went home on vacation and had a motorcycle crash. You know, those things are so below us, and then it's just so hard to fathom. Like, hey, how could this have happened to this guy? You still have that survival skill.
For me, it's the suicides and the overdoses that bother me the most, because
I agree. For me, I'm with the same aspect with you, D.
so the natural causes, and even because we all know the enemy gets a vote in combat, right? Like that goes without saying. Now there's some different things that follow you because of that, but when I'm home and I hear about a friend of mine who, right, the thought that I go to instantly is, why does people kill themselves? So then I start thinking about myself, where why did I ever put a gun in my mouth, right? Because I can be honest and say that there's been plenty of times I've been in a bathtub with a gun in my mouth and I'm bawling my fucking eyes out, because
Mhm.
what was the thought that I was having at that point? And it was, I'm worthless. I shouldn't be here. Everybody else would be better off if I'm not here. And then when you lose these dudes, it's like, I personally, I had a platoon sergeant when I became a squad leader. That was, no offense to anybody I've ever served with, but this dude was by far the best infantryman that I've ever met. He's taught me things that I never fucking understood until I met this dude. And his name is Sergeant First Class Jordan, and he ended up killing himself after
I
he got out
figured
of
that's who it was.
he got out of the army, and a few months ago he ended up taking his own life. And he thought something about himself that no one on the planet, except for maybe if his wife and him were having fights, you know what I mean, would have thought about him. So like he had this idea of the image of himself that was the most evil or horrible or useless or however you want to put it, that no one else would have said about him. Right? I know every private and every squad leader that worked for this dude would have said that he was amazing and the greatest person ever. So then I start to think about like that's why I started this whole project, is because I know like what Ortiz was saying about you specifically, Edwards. He has a lot of respect for you. He loves you. You know what I'm saying? Like on some no homo pause type shit. But he loves you, right? And when
That's not true. It's false.
what's it's all homo. So
It's pure homo.
yeah,
I love that man. Like, hey, he knows already. He knows what's up. There's very few people, and you already know too, Dan.
yeah,
Like,
I know. But it's
I met people in
it's that feeling
I met people in the
that we've
military that.
forgotten.
Yep.
It's that feeling that we miss from the military, because whenever I ask a dude that's gotten out, it's like, what do you miss the most? And it's like the people. I miss my brothers. Like I miss my boys. I miss being able to walk down the hall and be like, dude, what are we doing tonight, bro? Like, what's up? What's good? And then if I'm in some shit, like, hey, bro, I need some help, son. Like, and they're just down the
Hey,
hall.
baby, let's put them Timbs on. We out. We about to stop some
Yeah.
motherfuckers.
So, and these people will sit there and cry with you. Like I remember before Swenson, I think it was his third deployment. He was in my backyard and it was raining. It's pissing rain. There's all these civilians like partying with us and shit at my house. And I have this like concrete square in the backyard and he's bawling his eyes out and I'm like hugging him and we're holding each other crying. And it was the fucking most beautiful moment I've ever had in my life. But it was with another dude. And it's like, what the fuck, what can we do as these people's friends to show them that like we still give a fuck? Because I can't call everybody all the time. You know what I mean? I can't answer the phone every fucking time because I got kids. Like I have other responsibilities, and as much as I give a fuck about you, bro, like I still have shit to do. So like I remember a dude hit me up because I saw, you know how like on Facebook people be like making cries for help. So I kind of like messaged him and like, yo, what's good? And he's like, I'm going through it and whoop de whoop. And then he's like, I called the NCO that I cared about the most in the Army, and he didn't even remember who I was. And I'm worthless. And then he started thinking he was worthless and this, that, and the other. And I spent like a good 3 hours trying to talk him down. You know what I mean? And I can't do that every single time. I really can't do that every single time. So
To give you, just to insert to what you just said, I remember at the time when you first started this,
yeah,
and I was telling you, I'm like, hey man, this is something you could really promote, like via Twitch, YouTube, and all those things. You know, I was like, hey, listen, if you're down, I'll fly over there and I'll have like a podcast. And the very first thing you said was like, hey, listen, I make sure it's cool with my wife, because more than anything, your wife has been your goddamn roots.
yeah,
She has been the fucking root to your life in
facts.
every aspect, and I know that.
Yeah. And it's
And that's the thing. Like even with Red, I can't just go and see Red. I can't just go and see you
yeah,
kids. You guys have women in your lives that you guys hold to a certain level that are literally your women. Like you respect them. So how does it feel like for me just to be like, hey man, cause just come? No. For one, to me, I think that's disrespectful to you, and that's also disrespectful to your wife
yeah,
or wives in the, terminal sense. You know, because like you just said, we can't be there all the time, but when we can, we try to be. I'm not gonna call Dan Lee at fucking 3 in the morning if it's not an emergency. I'm not gonna call Red at 2 in the morning if it's not an emergency. So if you guys see that I'm calling, you guys are gonna answer because you guys know, like, hey man, it's out of your norm. Or Tito ain't just gonna call me like this.
You know
But
what?
the reality,
One of the things you talked about, with the wives and hey, we've got a family, and this is something that I preached to my soldiers throughout, my career was, hey, look, you might have a 20-year commitment to the military, 25, 30, whatever, but you do have a lifelong commitment to your family. And it's hard finding that life balance because you've got this family, this brotherhood in the military. You've also got your own family, and like you guys have both stated, once you're finished with the military, everybody kind of like picks up and goes their own way. We're still via social media meeting up, all that kind of stuff. We still have that connection, but your family's the one that's there when your brother's gone.
Yeah.
And one of the unique experiences that I was able to have was when I was the family readiness liaison, when you guys, were coming in and showing up.
2008.
Um,
Never forget it.
'Cause I was the guy that was deployed, all the time. Being back in the rear
Hmm.
when all the soldiers were gone, and my job was to like, watch the company and assist the spouses with issues. Um, it's no joke. They're deployed too. You know, you wake up in the morning when you're deployed and you're like, hey, I just got to stay alive and kill the enemy and keep my buddies alive. You know what? That's it. You know what's going on in real time with you. They don't. They have no clue. And it's that not knowing what's going on, especially when we've got to put out and say something like, hey, battalion's on comms blackout because somebody somewhere passed away. Every spouse is losing their mind because they have no idea who it is, the guy. If not, I remember going to a buddy's or to a spouse's home because she wanted paperwork. I had another FRL come with me, and as soon as we knocked on the door, she opened the door, and she saw both of us standing there holding paperwork. She's like, "Oh my God, what happened to him?" Like she immediately thought her husband was dead, and I felt so bad for
Yeah.
that. And it was quite literally like, "Hey, I'm just bringing you the paperwork you needed." But that's what our families go through whenever we're off doing army shit, and it's hard for everybody to deal with that.
Yeah. Especially when they like develop a battle drill for how to handle the kids and how to handle the finances, and she's over here being mom and dad, and then you come back in the picture and you start trying to swing your dick around or whatever, like I'm fucking this, that, and the other, and you have no idea what the flavor of the Kool-Aid is. You know what I mean? Because everything, it feels really strange when you come home because it feels like the world was put on pause, but it wasn't. Like
Yeah,
coming home, it's like
100%.
it's
Like for
it's
sure, because in in my perspective, I can't speak about the family aspect the way you guys do, but I sure as hell can speak about what it was like for being a single soldier and having to deal with some of those aspects of life, but in the barracks. Because and you know that, right? There's certain things that in when you're a family man, you ain't got to deal with. It's like, hey, listen, you're a family man. I get to go do this. I got to go back to my family, and then you're the single soldier, and sometimes you feel left out because you're like, so because I'm not married, I get treated like shit. We just get the back end of things. A soldier gets drunk. We got to do the push-ups. We got to be the ones to deal with things, and like there's certain aspects about the army that sucked, that definitely do suck when you're a single man. And that's always something that I feel never gets talked about because they're always like it's super inviting to be like, oh, when you're married, join the army, you get this, you get that. But when you're the single guy in the barracks that has to deal with, in my opinion, like I got to deal with shit back home, my family and stuff like that. Often get ignored.
yeah.
That's very true. And a lot of people don't take that into account. When guys are deployed, they're away from their spouses, they're away from their kids. At the same time, they still have that. I got to get back to my family. I got to do everything, within my sphere of influence to take care of my guys, get me back to my family. And when you're that single soldier downrange, and you don't have that support circle back home, it's tough. But on the flip side of that, your support circle is actually the guys that you deployed with.
Yeah.
When I got back from deployment, yeah, I could talk to my wife and my daughter about, what was going on, but like they don't understand it the way that we do. So there's pros and cons to both sides of that coin. And the hardest part
Yeah,
is
of
just
course.
finding out, finding the positives and doing, what's best as opposed to, oh, I'm alone, or oh shit, I got a family and they won't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
No, like I mean, again, no names being said, but there's dudes that I knew that were top grass. Their response to dealing with anything was just getting drunk, and I'm like, dude, what's what are you gonna accomplish? Like, I understand if you want to go to the fun, get drunk, or go to the mad or something, but like, to be home on a Tuesday and be ripped before it's freaking 12 o'clock, before we even have our second, formation, and you're already fucking ripped, and you an E6. What kind of fucking message are you sending for the younger soldiers that you already know?
Yeah.
And you being the one that been through worse shit.
It's
You know
hard.
what I'm saying?
Yeah, it is. It is hard, and the one thing to understand is that everybody's fighting their own battles, and
Yes.
everybody chooses to fight those battles differently. Um, and being in a leadership position in the military it's this assumed role that whatever bothers you guys doesn't bother you, and you can get over it easily, and you can help them with everything. I mean, for me, I had the training, I was given the tools to be able to help other guys deal with issues when they got home, and deal with PTSD and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't know how to apply that to myself, and that was the hardest part. I mean, it cost me a marriage, um, and it's there's just so much stuff that we deal with, and we tend to keep it all inside, um, until it's so toxic that it just ends up breaking us down and wounding us to the point to where we're just no good to anybody or ourselves, and we can't think outside of that box. Like, oh, I'm so ruined as a person. I'm a shitty husband, I'm a shitty father, I'm a shitty leader. I can't do anything for anybody. I can't even freaking take care of myself. Really hard to get out of that mindset. And that's when that like survivor's guilt comes in. Like, man, if I'd have just died on that fucking employment, I wouldn't have to deal with all this shit.
And
I wouldn't
nobody
have to
else
deal
would
with that
either.
anymore. Yeah, and nobody else would either.
It becomes real easy to like justify or rationalize your own death because if nothing else, we're really good at weighing options or variables of like Met TC and Okoka and like putting myself in the best position, and based on this and this and this, it's this decision that I have to make, and there's like tactical patience that if I don't make the decision by this time and allow the situation to develop, I may have made a decision too early. So our whole career is about that. But then we come home and we have these emotional problems or these social problems with like our wife or school or friends and moms and whatever. And everything just seems to be a problem. And then you find the lowest common denominator is you, right? Jocko Willenick wrote a book like Accountability or whatever the fuck, and everything is your fault. And that's, to be honest, that's bullshit. But at the same time, that's what we get taught in the
I was gonna
military.
say there's like an argument to that can be held because I'm reading a book about being held accountable. There's a
There is
I
an argument, but that argument is very nuanced. You know what I'm saying? And at this level that we're talking about, when you're first in this feeling of starting to take all these measurements about who's the problem, it always comes back to you. And then
absolutely.
with us, because every solution that we've ever been taught in the military involves death, it becomes very easy to be like, all right, everything's my fault. If I was just dead, nobody would have a problem anymore. There would be no problem. But that's the thought
Okay,
process that leads you there.
I'm gonna say that I personally am the opposite of that.
Okay.
In the aspect of I've had conversations like the ones you're trying to say where I've had E6s come up to me. I've for the sake of conversation, when I got out of active, I became a 92 Foxtrot. I got out in 2015. I left an E4. I was promotable multiple times. I personally chose not to get promoted. That was on me.
Okay.
E4 Mafia for life. That's just me. But I never took away from the fact that when I got to my unit, 716 Quartermaster Company, I'll never forget, my CEO didn't know how to calibrate a 50 cal. And I was like, wait, don't you have a sergeant in arms that's supposed to know how to do this? And he was like, oh, he doesn't know. And I'm like, damn, so because I have a CIB, you automatically assume I know how to do this. Yes, I know how to, but that doesn't mean that in your level, you shouldn't. So that's when I left the reserves. And I was just like jaded. But I never took away from the fact that, in my opinion, I couldn't talk to anyone. I was always like, just like the thing with Red, and I'll keep bringing it back. And if you rewind the camera, I bring it back to Red because the fact is, he was approachable. In my opinion, when I was a team leader, I became the best team leader because I was approachable. I got to teach my soldiers how to do things. I get to tell them, like, listen, don't do things this way. Do it this way. This is what's going to work. Because I was approachable, but not because of my position and rank. And that's something I feel like, honestly, you know, as much as people try to say the military's gone soft and this and that and oh, smoked, and I'm like, dude, you need smarter soldiers. You do need smarter soldiers. I understand the physical capabilities, and I understand the.
What does this have to do with being accountable? What is this? How does this tie into what I just said about accountability and everything is my fault?
Because there's only so much that you can actually hold yourself accountable for. Dude, you can only do so much as a leader.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
When you put yourself out there, there's only so much. Dude, Red, when I joined, Red didn't deploy with us. But he was still the one that was guiding us and telling us like different things when we had, I don't know if you guys remember, we had 4 days to have like training in Schweinfurt. That was like the most bootlegged training apparently known to man. It was like, yo, listen, you guys are deploying, learn this shit. But that's what, again, where I go to what you were saying, Danny, is because being approachable, being able to talk to someone.
Yeah.
You of all people, dude, you've had multiple lives. And that's no secret. Everyone knows that you've had some bad shit happen to you. You've been a great soldier. You've been a bad soldier. You've been an undisciplined soldier. But you've been an amazing leader.
I've been a shit leader too.
But again, that's what I try to tell you. And the same with Red. Red knows what it's like. Especially when you're at the top of the food chain.
One of the hard things with, you know, being a leader is, you know, the fact that, especially in the Army, you know, you are accountable for everybody below you. You know, it's like, hey, you know, Sergeant Danley, Private Joe, you know, he's in debt. He's got so much debt, and he's got a car he can't pay for, you know, and he's missing payments on it, and he's in debt, and the commander's getting called about this. What are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's that level of responsibility that we have to take for these guys. So when it comes to being accountable, you've got to help them control every aspect of their life. So when, you know, you guys deploy and bad stuff happens, you know, you still feel this responsibility for others. And then you tend to put yourself on the back burner. And when you put yourself on the back burner, taking care of everybody else's shit, when you get home, you actually have some time to focus on yourself and reflect on yourself, and you realize, like, man, I'm not handling things as well as, yeah, I can't personally live up to the standards that I set for my soldiers so that they can be self-sufficient, be able to take care of themselves.
Yeah.
I am not able to help myself in a way that, you know, would be an example to them. And That
Ask you
accountability.
guys a simple question. How many times have you guys heard, for example, oh, you should be able to do this. You were in the army. I've like made it my mission. I'm like, dude, what you think you're saying doesn't mean what you think it means. Because I was able to do certain things in the army doesn't mean that I'm supposed to be able to keep I'm not capable of doing that for the rest of my life. And so many people say, like, oh man, you were in the army. Why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? I'm like, dude, do you really think I'm supposed to be up for 48 hours a day?
Yeah.
Like, oh, but you did it in the army. What choice did I have? What were my options? Either I do this right, like I'm gonna get freaking 72-hour staff duty. And that's why I try to tell people, I'm like, dude, when you tell people that, oh man, you did it in the army, man, you could do it. I'm like, dude, that doesn't mean exactly what you think it means. Because it's not true. You have no idea what soldiers have to go through, regardless of your MOS.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something like really shitty. Because again, it goes to survivor's guilt. Because just because you weren't in infantry doesn't mean you didn't go through shit. My bad, you didn't have the fucking CIB, dude.
That's very
You,
true. I mean, everybody when they're deployed, they're there to do their job. Our job is to actually go out, find the bad guys, and deal with them. There are other people that are there, and their job is to just get equipment from here to here, or make sure
absolutely.
that logistically things are squared away. My wife, she was a medic. She was a combat medic. She was supposed to work on the base. She was on Bagram, Afghanistan. They were doing like a 5K run. A bunch of guys, a couple of guys wearing suicide vests came in and blew their vests, and she immediately had to go from "Hey, I'm just doing PT" to now I've got to try to pick up body
Yeah,
parts
save lives.
and stuff like that. And it's hard, especially when we're combat arms. It's especially hard for us to understand that, like, what, we volunteered to do this job. Other guys volunteered to do other jobs. And we're almost expected to be able to handle everything that's thrown at us because we chose to be GI Joe, and we expect everybody else that didn't do that was just support to us, to be somewhat weaker or something like that. But what we don't understand is that we could not do our jobs without the support of so many other people, within the Army, and their experiences are not made, you know, they're not made smaller just because they didn't do what we did.
No, their experiences aren't sporadic. It's not for everyone. What they experience doesn't go for everybody. It doesn't apply to everyone. That's just a reality.
I
And
had a buddy whose spouse was in the military, and she had PTSD based on the fact that, like, she was supply, and the supply deliveries and stuff like that come in via helicopter. She would be taking those, and she became friends with some of the pilots. Well, just because some of those guys had been shot down and died, was very tragic to her. Hey, these are friends. Totally different jobs. You know, they had died, and it was so tragic to her that she had PTSD over this. And it's interesting to see how so many different things that happen, whether it's directly happening to you or whether it's happening to people that you care about or just people that you know, how it can affect you. And there's so much with the brain and the mind and the psyche and how we feel and all that kind of stuff. We just fully don't understand. Fortunately, we're at a point now in our society where we're actually trying to figure that stuff out, and the conversations and the talk that happen with it, they're good. It's just it's never gonna be as easy as everyone thinks it is. Go
That,
through these
No.
things and deal with it.
that's for sure.
Um,
And
and
especially with the
never,
stigma.
Hmm.
it's never gonna be as easy, but at the same time, it's only gonna be as hard as you make it. The hardest thing to do is hold that honest mirror up to yourself and look into that and say like, look,
Yeah.
I'm acting
Hmm.
like this because of this stuff. Now, should I act this way to other people because this stuff happened to me? No. You got to talk to these people in your life. You got to talk to the people around you. You got to talk to your
Hold
buddies.
yourself accountable. That's all it is. Hold yourself accountable.
Yeah,
That's the
and
reality.
yeah, I had a platoon sergeant in Ibolic that was telling me, hey, self don't tell on self. And to me, that's one of the truest things I've ever heard. Nobody is willingly going to admit their faults. Say, hey, I
Nope.
did this wrong. And now that I'm retired, I look back and I think, man, I was such a horrible leader. I could have been such a better leader if I had just, instead of trying to be, friends and familiar with my soldiers, if I'd have been, more of a leader, you know, um, if I'd have stopped joking around so much and, just if I'd have been different. It's really not fair for
One
me as I
name
am
for
now.
me. One name comes to mind when you think about that, because I know my career would have been a completely different aspect if at the time what happened with a certain somebody didn't. That was a ranger, and I know I would have gone down the exact same route, and I would have been fucking goddamn Captain America. But it's like you said, you know, if you choose not to accept the things that are wrong with you, and you can't accept it, and you won't choose to fix those things, then
Ultimately, everything affects everyone differently. And what a lot of people forget is they need to reflect upon themselves and utilize these tools that are available for us. Even if you don't want to talk to people at the VA, if you don't want to talk, if you don't want to call up the crisis line for the VA, you've still got brothers. You've still got people that have been there and they've done that and they understand what you're going through and how you feel. And there's nothing wrong with calling somebody up and saying like, "Hey, I feel this way because of this, and you know, it's hurting me, and I need some help."
I agree. I 100% agree. Except I start getting real pissed off when it's the seventh 3 o'clock in the morning phone call, and I've given you the advice and I've told you everything, and we have this looping conversation where I'm telling you to go to therapy. You tell me all these problems, and I'm like, look, you can do this. You can quit drinking. You can stop doing drugs. You can go to therapy. You can start accepting the things that you cannot change and change the things that you can. And if you're not doing that, like, why are you calling me still? Do you see what I'm saying? Because, like, at some point,
and
you
it's
have to go and help yourself. I can't do everything over the phone. Like, even these videos, you can't just watch this video and think that it's a supplement for fucking therapy. This video is really to change the meme inside of your head, the idea that weak people go to therapy, or weak people have problems, or it's weak to say that I need help. That's the only thing that I'm good for, is telling you that it gets better, it gets easier. It never stops being hard, but it does get easier. You know what I mean? Like, the first problem is accepting the fact that you have a problem. And then,
admit. It's literally just admit.
yeah,
Admit that there's something wrong with you.
yeah.
That's
It,
it. It starts with acknowledging. Literally, it's just acknowledging, hey, this is what's wrong with me.
mm,
Now that I know that there's something wrong with me, I can talk to someone else that has been through that.
and I can find the solution.
Now
So,
from there, I can
so
find
then,
the solution. Like you said, just talk to somebody. Listen, man, I
so then, to
mean,
address, like what this whole conversation started out as, like, hey, why is suicide so predominant within the veteran community and military members and stuff like that, and why is PTSD leading so many to suicide? Um, Ultimately, it's just we're human. We're not perfect. We can read all the books, we can go to all the therapy, we can talk to everybody we know. The hardest part, I think, for any person is to look in that mirror and say, look,
Facts.
what's going on with me that makes me think, feel, and act these specific ways. And once individuals are able to do that, then they will, like Danley said, they'll stop calling you at 2 o'clock in the morning for the eighth time in a row. They'll actually go and seek help. Um,
And then
but
they'll
it's
call me
just-
at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and tell me how their day was and how what we talked about, how much it helped. And, they'll say thank you or whatever. And they'll be like, bro, I appreciate everything you did. And at the end of the day, that's all I want is I'm just trying to help you fight the fight inside of your head. But if you ain't going to take the battle drills that I'm trying to give you,
That's the
I don't
point
know.
of Brothers in Time. Just to reiterate on what you're saying, that's the whole point of Brothers. That's why you have random dudes
Yeah.
that you know that you've served with, because we all have different perspectives. I've never been a platoon sergeant. I ain't go to fucking 3/4 of the school that Red's been to. But guess what? I can give you the perspective from being a private to a team leader and give you how I felt and what it was like for me to go through some of the different aspects of life that you guys have been through.
Yeah.
And that's why I
regardless,
feel
regardless of whatever level you're at, it's, to me, it's still the same experience. Whether you're that soldier doing what you're told to do, or whether you're that leader telling the soldiers to do what they're doing, or whether you're that, officer that's, coming up with the plan and, telling you guys what needs to happen. It doesn't change the fact that, like, when the bullets are flying and everything comes down to it,
everybody's safe.
those are your brothers to your left and your right. And you will do for them what they will do for you to ensure, mutual survivability and safety. And it's a level of love and care that a lot of people don't understand, but it's also a level of insanity. I was given a book to read before I even joined, and I think the book was just called War, but it talked about that soldiers on the battlefield are operating at a very 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 specific level of insanity because they are given the choice of God or a God. They decide if someone lives or dies, and that's very hard for the human psyche to deal with, because if you decide to take a life, if you decide to save a life, that's something you have to live with the rest of your life.
Mhm.
And it's hard to cope with that sometimes.
Absolutely. Because at that point, you have to accept the actions of your, and you're literally the only one that can do that. Nobody else can accept what
It's
it's
it's hard to look at somebody down the barrel of your weapon, the sights of your weapon, and look at them and make the decision like, this person needs to die, because if they don't die, if I don't end their life, they can end mine, or they can end the lives of somebody I care
right.
about.
And again, like, with all due respect, it's never an easy option. One one hero's one country's heroes, another country's, and that's kind of like when I learned the mentality of hearts and minds. I never understood what that meant until I joined the military. I didn't know what that was like. And I remember one of my first missions, with just being one of the craziest ones. And I'm like, what the it's crazy. And it's like you said, it's having to be able to make that split second decision, and at the same time being able to cope with it and understanding that this is the reason why you did it. And that's something, like you said, most people will never understand.
And I
And
think
it's
I think a lot of this kind of contributes and feeds directly into what Danley stated at the beginning. Like, why suicide rate is so high amongst service members, why PTSD has such a impact on people that have served, and it's because we're having to ask ourselves these questions and then answer them and then act upon them. And it's not something as simple as like, well, am I going to turn in this report, and run it up to the office chain? It's no. Am I going to tell other people that I care about to run in a direction where they will be exposed to enemy fire and could possibly die? Am I going to, engage this guy who, the enemy, whether you're shooting at, they are fathers, brothers, sons, husbands, uncles, grandparents, depending on the situation. But do I have the right to take their life away from them? And it's a hard question to think about and mill over
Summarize.
afterwards.
There's no way you could summarize that type of action. No way.
But in that instance, you have to make that decision, and that's where like the police, I think, have the shittiest hand dealt to them, because
Sure.
they pull somebody over for speeding, and they can walk up, and it can be a mom getting home quickly, or it can be somebody who's got shit in the trunk that they don't want you to know about. So it can be a random, speeding ticket, or somebody shoots you in the face.
Yep.
And they have, just split seconds to decide what they're going to do. Same thing as us that have been downrange.
But
I remember
go ahead.
Hasbrook. He always taught me that the police are taught defense. As infantrymen, we're taught offense. And we're only taught offense because there's certain rules. Obviously, there's certain we can't just go and shoot someone willy-nilly.
Yeah.
There's certain things, and I always try to tell people, I'm like, as much as sometimes the media tries to portray the infantrymen are the idiots that anybody can, you guys don't understand that sometimes we're the most disciplined part of the military.
For sure.
It's easy to squeeze the trigger, easy peasy. Do you know how hard it is to feel threatened and not shoot? Try doing that.
I agree.
Try doing that. And that's why, again, police officers are constantly on the media, because they're like, oh, you guys are just shooting. I'm like, yo, you guys give police officers shit, but this is the same thing that you try to monopolize the argument of like why America's wrong, because this is the same thing that infantry soldiers trained to do.
Yep.
It's like I said, it's easy to pull the trigger. I could just shoot somebody, easy peasy. But try being in that situation and recognizing that you can't do that.
Yeah.
And then to come back home and be trained to, it's fucking hard, man. It's fucking hard.
I take that as like when I'm in conversations with people, and specifically with my wife, I get upset about certain things, or I get offended by certain things, or something hits me in the feels or whatever, and I'm having to learn now that I don't always have to shoot. I don't always have to fight. You see what I'm saying? Like there's parts of that operational environment that I don't fully understand, and I'm not taking into account everything that has been going on. And I take a lot of things way too personal. And I can directly associate that with my life as an infantryman, because when I really boil it down, it's like I feel like I need to fix the problem now, because the longer the problem is a problem, the more suffering everybody has. You know what I mean? If I fix it this moment, we don't have to deal with the repercussions of it, the problem anymore. You know what I mean? And that's where I need to. I'm starting to learn that I need to work on my method of engagement. You know what I mean? The fire that I'm supporting my wife with, right? Where like, all right, the thing that I think I'm defending myself with, and I feel like a lot of the times when we talk about survivor's guilt and thinking about being alive after somebody else is no longer here, I start to compare myself with this potential that they could have been versus what I am now. And you said it really well earlier that, and this is what I try to tell everybody when I have this conversation, when they're, up against the wall or they have the gun, it's like, bro, if I was dead or if you were dead, right? What would you want me to do? Would you want me to kill myself, or would you want me to live my life to the best of my ability? Would you want me to be drinking every night and drinking myself into a hospital? Like, nah. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like, I use these dudes that I know and the people that we've lost is kind of like a backdrop, so that I don't have to hit rock bottom every time I need to learn a lesson. Because the best thing about rock
Like,
bottom is you get to pick where it is. You don't have to go all the way.
no. I'll tell you this much. As somebody, personally, I've had good amount of money in my bank account.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that went to shit.
Same.
Bottom of the barrel. Then I had to rise myself up. I did it again. To do what? Bottom of the barrel.
That happens.
And then you ask yourself, like, why is it that I'm always at the bottom of the barrel? And then you start looking at everything and you start questioning, wait a minute. This is this. This is this. And you're like, what the fuck am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that are in the military that are successful. I have friends that are in the military that have homes, happy lives, happy wives, all that shit. Why can't I do the exact same shit? What is it about me that I can't reach the same level of happiness? Because at the end of the day, as human beings, that's all we want to try to gain, happiness. In whatever aspect you choose to.
What's the answer?
But as military personnel, sometimes we don't know how to get that. We don't know what to do with that. Because you try being a soldier that only knows combat for 9 out of 12 months out of a deployment. How do you try to come back to reality? Good luck with that, pal. And I'm somebody, I preach perception is reality. What you choose to make out of your life, that's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, you've been through whatever, you've been through this, you've been there. All right, all that happened. Now what? What do you choose to do about it? Because that's up to you.
You don't think that potentially a lot of these people that are having problems are living a persona that may or may not be true?
I'll give you an old quote. When in combat, what's the number one enemy you have to face?
I don't know.
Yourself. You have to be able to make that split-second decision whether you choose to make that action or not. It's literally up to you. Nobody's putting a gun to your head because you're already in combat, right?
Yeah.
So who has the decision to make? You're literally only up against yourself. So I say that to say this. After all that's happened, it's up to you to get the help. It's up to you to talk to different people. It's up to you to open up your heart and understand that if you've lost someone and you don't want to go down that road, open your heart up.
Facts.
I know it sounds corny and it sounds cheesy, but it's literally, in my honest opinion, it's literally about just opening up your heart, accepting that, you know what? You're not alone, man.
True. And it's okay
literally,
to ask
you're
for
not
help.
alone. I know it sounds fucking corny and cheesy, but literally open up your heart and accept that, you know what? We've lost. So if we've all lost, why is it that we can't open our hearts to accept that somebody else wants to love you?
That is very true. That is
I
very true.
don't get it. I love you, brother.
Yeah,
We don't talk all the time, but I love you.
I love you too.
I don't talk to Red all the time, but I love you. I don't talk to a lot of my boys from the army. Some dudes they don't even know I'm alive. They don't even know I exist. I freaking Red, remember Malone? A big army dude?
Yeah.
Motherfucker hit me up like a month ago. Listen, I need you to be my best man.
That's what's up.
I don't have anybody. And I was like, why don't you have anybody? Like, I'm sure you've known people. And he was like, yeah, but what happened between us? And I was like, well, I had to knock on your door to ask you, hey, listen, I know I'm a private and you're a sergeant, but you're the biggest motherfucker in third platoon. I'd like for you to teach me how to lift weights. And he was like, yeah, whatever, pussy. I'm going to give you this book and I'll talk to you some other day. Okay. The rest of the deployment, you couldn't see us away from each other because I just literally, I just needed to learn and I wanted to talk to someone. And he was there. And for him to like really hit me up, even like to tell me like, hey, listen, man, I don't have anybody, but you've always been my little brother, so I want you to be my best man. And I was like, hey, say less.
I kind of went through the same thing with when I got married to my wife. A buddy that I've had, quite literally, our mothers were pregnant with us at the same time, and we've been friends since diapers. He never served in the military. He chose to take on the family business, and he's kicking ass at that. He couldn't make it out to be my best man, and somebody that I had known a fraction of the time was the guy that I went to next, and it was because they meant so much to me, and it almost feels weird, like, hey, look, yeah, we had this relationship at work, this isn't something that like Jan in accounting is gonna ask Tony in sales, can you be my fucking dude of honor, my maid of honor, and they've
Yeah.
only worked together for 2 years, but you know what, with mesh together and meld together when we're doing what we're doing, it just makes sense that we build those relationships and be that close.
And that's I feel like a large part of why I feel social media is so powerful and like building some type of community, because the veterans we have friends that touch other friends that touch other friends and so on and so forth. Like I know people in every state. I know people in almost every country that I can think of, you know what I mean, that got out of the army and like moved to fucking Colombia or Costa Rica or whatever. And I know that everybody is having the same problems, if not to the same magnitude, but like on the same vein, basically. And at the end of the day, what I want to say, because we're coming towards the end, what I want to say specifically is that there's no problem with asking for help. And there's no reason that you shouldn't ask for help. And if you feel like you're the only one that's feeling this, you're not. And the other problem that I have, I guess, is I hear a lot of dudes when they go to therapy say that the therapist just didn't understand. And I feel like that's less of a problem with her understanding. She doesn't have to go through it to be able to have empathy with you. You know what I mean? Because my wife hasn't been through all this shit, but she has empathy. She understands what it's like to see a little girl, or she understands what it would be like for me to see a little girl get blown up, right? Like, especially right after my daughter was born.
Like, like to add to what you just said, the basic definition of empathy is to understand.
Yeah.
Literally, that's it. Just understand.
And then I think the problem is that a lot of us have a problem with expressing what it is that we're feeling, because most of us live our lives feeling two emotions. It's either anger or I'm okay, and that's it. And I feel like if once you've gone to therapy, you can start to be able to identify certain emotions.
I didn't go to therapy.
We're done. That's the end.
All right. Well,
I just wanted to end it on a good note.